Turning your podcast into an asset that you can sell. Ever wonder if your podcast is worth money? Could you actually sell it one day? Well, the answer is yes, but only if you've built it like a business, not just a hobby. I'm going to show you how to turn your podcast into a real transferable asset, one that a buyer, a network, or even a partner might pay for. So stick with me because we'll cover what makes a show valuable, how to protect your ownership, how to monetize in ways that last, and how to prepare your podcast for the kind of exit most creators never even imagine. Hey there, I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, and this is Legit Podcast Pro, the show where I help creators build profitable, protected, professional podcasts. Now, most podcasters focus on the launch, but few think about the finish line. And the truth is, if you've done the right things along the way, your show can become an asset that's worth real money. By the end of this episode, you will know the steps to build your podcast so it's attractive to buyers, whether that's a full sale, a syndication deal, or some kind of a licensing arrangement. So let's get started. Now, before you can sell something, you need to understand what buyers actually want. Here are the elements that make a podcast valuable. Number one is audience loyalty. It's not just about big numbers. After all, a show with 1,000 engaged, responsive listeners could be worth more than a show with 100,000 casual downloads. So start a spreadsheet or something and track listener engagement. Surveys, email list signups, click-throughs. Keep track of some of those metrics. Number two is a strong brand identity. Your podcast needs to stand out. A unique name, recognizable artwork, and a clear voice in the market. So audit your branding. Ask, does it look professional and consistent across all the platforms? If not, get on it. Number three is intellectual property protections. Now, we'll cover more on this in the next segment, but if you don't own your name or content, it's not really saleable. Number four, reliable revenue streams. Ads, sponsorships, memberships, courses, merch. Buyers want to know that the show makes money, or at least has that potential to make money. Number five is transferable systems. Can the show run without you? So SOPs, workflows, a team, these all make your podcast scalable and transferable. So if you haven't already done so, start documenting your processes. Ask yourself, would someone want to step into my shoes and keep this thing running? If not, maybe it's time to fix that. Now, here are some of the biggest roadblocks to selling your podcast. It's all around ownership. How sure are you that you actually own the show and everything that goes into it? If you don't own the intellectual property, you can't really sell it. So start with the trademarks. Your podcast name, logo, and branding. These are the things that buyers are going to value. Without a registered trademark, the buyer risks losing the brand later on. You can search the USPTO database for conflicts and file a trademark fairly easily, or hire someone like me to help you get that locked in. Copyright is next. Copyright protects your episode content, the artwork, the music, the show notes. And by default, the person who creates it owns it. But that means that if you have a producer or an editor and there's no contract with the words work made for hire set out in there, they could own parts of your show. So review your contracts or get them drafted in the first place to confirm that you own the final product outright. Number three, contracts with guests and co-hosts. If a guest or co-host could claim ownership of past episodes because they helped you make that episode, well, a buyer might run for the hills. That's why it's so important to always use written releases and agreements. I've seen podcasts that were unsellable because one of the co-hosts just disappeared. Technically, they still owned half the show. So don't let that be you. Get with the program, get your contracts in order to make sure you're covered. A podcast that earns money is worth more than one that doesn't. But here's the catch. Not all revenue streams are created equal. Some of the better streams are things like sponsorships. If you have the right, especially if you have the right to assign or transfer those contracts to a new owner of the company. Membership communities with recurring revenue. Courses, coaching, and services tied to the podcast, and licensing or syndication deals are all really valuable. Now, some of the weaker kinds of revenue streams are things like single one-off ad deals, informal affiliate partnerships with no agreements. So if all your show's value depends on being on the mic, well, it's harder for you to sell. But if you've got a format, a brand, and a repeatable process, you've built systems, someone else could step in. So document everything. production schedules, sponsorship agreements, workflows, post-production workflows, all of that. Form an LLC or a corporation to hold the show. That way, a buyer purchases the company instead of just a laundry list of individual assets. Now, let's talk about exit options for podcasters. Not every exit looks the same. Here are a few different possible outcomes. First off is the full-out sale of the goods, right? The sale of the whole thing. You're selling the brand, the content library, and the audience. The buyer gets everything, and you are free to move on. Another approach is licensing, where you retain ownership, but you're granting others rights to use or distribute the show. For example, selling the foreign language adaptation rights or something. Now, syndication is where your show is also going to air on radio, television, or some streaming platforms in exchange for a fee. You still own it and produce it, but someone else gets to handle some of or all of the distribution and probably keep some of the most of the lion's share of the money from that distribution. And fourth is partnerships and mergers, where you're folding your podcast into a larger network or brand or maybe just another partner, sometimes in exchange for a share of equity in their business or ongoing revenue. Key lesson here, selling your job, that's where the whole show depends on you, isn't nearly as valuable as selling a business or a business asset. So how do you make your show ready to sell? Well, number one, audit those assets. Make a list of all your intellectual property, all your contracts, audience stats, and revenue streams. Then clean up ownership and make sure you've got everything you think you own. File your trademarks, confirm your copyright assignments, and make sure all co-hosts and guests have signed releases. Number 3, organize your financials. Buyers want clean books. They want to see the revenues, the expenses, the profit and loss. They want to know that there's nothing weird hiding out there that's going to bite them in the butt. Next up, document things. Document your SOPs for recording, editing, publishing, and promotion. The less anything depends on you, the more valuable it is. And number 5, build a pitch. Just like selling any other business, you'll need to have a narrative. For a podcast, that means being able to explain who listens to this show, demographics, specifics even. Who do they love? Why do they love it? How does it make money? What opportunities might there be for growth? So here's a bold idea. Even if you're not planning to sell anytime soon, start preparing now. A sellable podcast is also a stronger, more profitable podcast to run. So here's the big takeaway for you. Your podcast can be worth real money, but only if you treat it like a business. Protect your intellectual property, build reliable revenue, document your systems, and always think ahead. And if you want to learn how to make your podcast profitable, protected, and professional from the start, check out my free on-demand training. It's over at podcastertraining.com. It's there for you, ready whenever you are. And in less than an hour, you will have a roadmap for growth, monetization, and building a podcast that lasts and sells. So don't wait. Head over to podcastertraining.com and start now. I'm Gordon Firemark, the podcast lawyer, and this has been Legit Podcast Pro. And until next time, keep on creating, keep on growing, and keep it legit so you can sell it. Have a great day.